College Algebra Homework 38 starts off with creating an inconsistent system of linear equations. If you remember, an inconsistent system of equations means your lines have to be parallel to each other because they're not going to touch and therefore they're not going to have a solution. So what we want to do is rearrange both our equations in slope-intercept form so that we can then compare the slopes. So we want them in the form of y equals mx plus b, because then we know the value in front of our x has to be our slope. So taking our first equation and rearranging it, I've got to move my dx to the other side, so it's going to be negative. So negative 9y is going to equal negative dx, and then we have the plus 4. So I've just moved my dx to the other side, changed the sign. I then have to divide by negative 9. I'm going to divide everything by negative 9. And so y is going to equal, here I have a negative over a negative, so it's going to be positive, d over 9x. Positive over a negative, so minus 4/9. So I've got my first equation rearranged. I now have to rearrange my second equation. And so same thing, here I'm going to move my x term to the other side. Since it's negative, it's going to become positive. So negative 15y is going to equal a positive 20x minus 17. I'm then going to divide by my negative 15. So y is going to equal, I have a positive over a negative, which is a negative. I can divide both of these by 5, so I am going to have 4/3 x, and then here I have a negative over a negative, so it's positive 17/15 because I can't reduce that down. So now that I have them both in slope-intercept form, basically what I'm going to do is set up a proportion saying that the slope of this line has to equal the slope of that line. So I'm going to say the d over 9 has to equal the negative 4/3. Notice I put my negative with my top. It doesn't really matter. It's either with the top, with the bottom, but not with both. One or the other is negative. And then I'm going to solve by cross multiplying. So d times 3 would be 3d. 9 times negative 4 is negative 36. And when I divide by 3, d would have to be negative 12. So this would have to be negative 12x minus 9y equals 4 in order for those two lines to be parallel and make an inconsistent system of equations. So d equals negative 12. Number 2 then. Same thing, I'm finding the value of c that causes my system of equations not to have a solution, in other words, to be parallel lines. So I'm going to rearrange my top equation. I'm going to move my x to the other side. So cy would equal negative 10x minus 10. I'm then going to divide by my c. As weird as that looks, y is going to equal negative 10 over cx minus 10 over c. So I've got my top equation all rearranged. I got to rearrange my second equation. Again, I'm going to move my x term to the opposite side. So 12y is going to equal a positive 15x minus 17. I'm then going to divide by 12. So y is going to equal, I can reduce that down. They're both divisible by, just thinking, 3. If I divide by 3, I'm going to get 5/4 x minus 17/12. And again then, I want my slopes to be equal in order to have parallel lines. So 5/4 is going to equal negative 10 over c. And when I cross multiply, 5c would equal negative 40, so if I divide by 5, c would have to be negative 8. So I'd have to have negative 8y up there for my lines to be parallel. Number 3, again, wants us to find the value of b so that the system's equations do not have a solution. I'm going to take my top equation again, solve it for y, put it in slope-intercept form. So 8y would equal, that would be negative 6x minus 5 then, moving my x term to the other side. I'm then going to divide by 8. Y is going to equal, and if I divide that by 2, I'm going to get negative 3/4 x minus 5/8. On the next one, if I rearrange that, I got to move my x term to the other side, so negative 20y is going to equal negative bx plus 12. I'm then going to divide by negative 20. So y is going to equal, I've got a negative over a negative, which makes that a positive, b over 20x. And then a positive over negative is a negative. I can divide by 4, so I would have 3/5. And so again, I want to just simply set up my proportion that says my two slopes have to be equal. The negative 3/4 has to equal b over 20. So cross multiplying, 4b would equal negative 60, and if I divide by 4, b is going to equal negative 15. So this would have to be negative 15x minus 20 equals 12 for my two lines to be parallel.